March 18, 1853. A small group of pioneers broke ground in the Utah desert, people who had walked hundreds of miles on foot to build something they believed would last forever. They had no machines, no cranes, no modern tools of any kind. And yet, 170 years later, engineers are spending $2 billion, not to tear this building down, but to save it. So what exactly are they trying to protect? And why does it cost more than most skyscrapers to preserve a single old temple? That answer is more complicated than anyone expected. Welcome. Today we are going to look at one of the most ambitious engineering projects in modern American history, a project that combines 19th century craftsmanship with 21st century science, all to preserve a single building in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is the story of the Salt Lake Temple, belonging to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is one of the most recognized religious structures in the United States, and it is currently undergoing a transformation so extraordinary that even engineers who have spent their entire careers on large projects describe it as something they have never seen before. We are not here to debate theology or pass judgment on any belief system. We are here to examine what is happening, why it matters, and what it tells us about the relationship between human history, faith, and the science of preservation. So let us begin, not with the engineers, but with the people who first put stone to ground more than a century and a half ago. In 1847, a group of religious settlers arrived in the Salt Lake Valley after one of the most difficult migrations in American frontier history. They had been driven out of their previous homes, had buried family members along the trail, and had arrived in what was then an uninhabited desert with almost nothing. Within days of arriving, their leader Brigham Young reportedly pointed to a specific piece of ground and said, "This is where we will build our temple." It was a declaration that seemed almost impossible to fulfill at the time. Construction officially began in 1853. What followed was 4 decades of labor that no modern construction firm would recognize as efficient or practical. Workers quarried massive blocks of granite-like stone called quartz monzonite from a canyon located about 20 miles away. Because there were no railroads yet, these enormous stones were hauled by ox-drawn wagons over rough terrain, a journey that could take days for a single load. And then, as if the task was not already difficult enough, a military force arrived in the territory in 1857, and the workers buried the entire foundation under dirt to hide it, pretending the land was just a farmer's field. When the threat passed and they dug it back up, some of the stones had cracked. They had to start certain sections over entirely. Think about that for a moment. These were people with almost no resources living in difficult conditions who chose to restart the work rather than cut corners. What does that tell us about how seriously they took this project? The temple was finally completed in 1893. 40 years after construction began. 6 granite towers rise above the building, the tallest reaching over 200 feet. The walls are made from that durable quartz monzonite stone, which has withstood Utah's harsh winters and dry summers for well over a century. But here is the part that most people never think about. The upper walls may be strong, but what lies beneath them is a different story entirely. The original foundation was built from a softer type of stone called sandstone. It was carved by hand in the 19th century, using tools that were primitive by any modern standard. At the time, it was a remarkable achievement. But sandstone is not what engineers would choose today, and it was never designed to handle the kind of seismic forces that the Salt Lake Valley is now known to produce. The valley sits in a geologically active zone. Scientists have known for some time that a major earthquake in this region is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. A significant seismic event here could be catastrophic for a building whose foundation was built before the science of earthquake engineering even existed. So the question became, what do you do with a structure this old, this large, and this historically significant, when its foundation was simply not built for the world we live in now? The easiest answer would have been demolition and reconstruction. Tear out the old sandstone, pour modern concrete, install modern steel, and start fresh underground. It would have been faster, cheaper, and far less complicated from an engineering standpoint. Church leaders rejected that option. The reason they gave was not purely structural, it was deeply personal. That original sandstone foundation was laid by pioneers who sacrificed enormously to put it there. To simply remove it and replace it, they felt, would be to erase the physical evidence of that sacrifice. It would be as if those people had never done what they did. So the decision was made: preserve the pioneer foundation and build a new one beneath it. Without the temple ever experiencing the change, lead design engineer Mason Walters described the goal in precise technical language. He said they needed to transfer the entire weight of the building from the old foundation to a new one, without the structure above ever knowing it had been moved. The total weight involved, approximately 185 million pounds. What does an engineering problem of that scale actually look like? Let us go underground. Crews began excavating the soil beneath the existing pioneer foundation, working in tight, confined spaces, removing dirt without disturbing the stones above them. It was slow, careful, and physically demanding work. The main innovation installed at this stage is called base isolation. This is a seismic engineering technology that has been used in other buildings around the world, but never at a scale quite like this. 98 massive devices, each one a layered combination of steel plates and rubber, were installed beneath the building. Each device is capable of supporting up to 8 million pounds of weight. Here is what makes them remarkable. During an earthquake, these isolators do not hold the building rigid. They allow it to move up to 5 feet in any horizontal direction, absorbing and redirecting the seismic energy rather than letting it travel straight up through the walls. The building essentially floats on its foundation during a quake, moving slowly and safely rather than shaking violently. But the isolators were only part of the solution. Engineers also needed to address the vertical strength of the towers themselves. To do this, they drilled deep holes, 150 feet down, straight through the historic stone towers. Through these holes, they threaded a total of 260 miles of high-strength post-tensioning cable. These cables, now running invisibly inside the ancient stone, effectively bind the towers together and reinforce them against the kind of twisting forces an earthquake produces. And in areas too confined for machinery, workers crawled inside 4-foot-wide steel pipes and excavated the earth beneath the foundation using hand tools, picks and shovels, just as the original builders might have used, because there was simply no other way to reach those spaces. Here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In March of 2020, while the seismic reinforcement system was still only partially installed, the Salt Lake Valley experienced a real earthquake. It measured 5.7 on the Richter scale, significant enough to cause damage across the region. At the temple, the shaking knocked the trumpet from the hands of the Angel Moroni statue that sits atop the central spire. The statue itself remained in place, but the trumpet fell. For the engineering team, this was more than just a symbolic moment. It was data. The partially completed system had responded to a real seismic event, and the results revealed something important. The vertical shock waves from the quake were creating unexpected lateral movement at the tops of the spires. The spires were at risk of separating from the main structure in a larger event. This discovery led to a significant redesign. Additional steel frames and new internal cables were added to all 6 spires, work that had not been in the original plan. The earthquake essentially became a live test that identified a flaw before a larger disaster could expose it. In engineering, there is a saying that the best way to test a structure is with reality. Reality arrived in 2020, and the team used what they learned. What do you think? Is it remarkable that nature provided this kind of mid-project correction? Or would you have preferred the team to catch this in a simulation beforehand? Tell me in the comments. While all of this work was unfolding underground, a parallel restoration effort was taking place inside the temple itself. And this is where the attention to historical detail becomes almost difficult to believe. Experts went back to photographs taken in 1893, the year the temple was completed. They studied the colors visible in those images. They then physically scraped away dozens of layers of paint from the interior walls, peeling back decade after decade of renovation decisions until they reached the very first layer, the one applied by the original craftsman. That original color palette was then precisely replicated for the restoration. Original stained glass windows attributed to the Tiffany studio of the late 19th century were carefully removed, conserved, and reinstalled, not replaced. Hand-carved woodwork that had survived more than a century was preserved rather than reproduced. The approach throughout was to save what existed rather than approximate it with something new. Even the solid stone spiral staircases inside the towers, which had accumulated generations of varnish and grime, were cleaned using laser technology. The laser removes buildup at a molecular level, stripping away decades of accumulated dirt without touching the stone itself. The craftsmen who carved those stairs would not recognize the tool, but they would recognize the result. A new 100,000 square foot addition was also built on the north side of the building to accommodate a growing congregation. The design was carefully integrated to complement rather than compete with the original architecture. Let us take a moment to consider the scale of what we have been describing. $2 billion, 7 years of active construction, 98 base isolators, 260 miles of post-tensioning cable, 96 steel pipes, each 4 feet wide and 40 feet long, driven beneath the foundation. Workers on their hands and knees inside those pipes, moving earth one handful at a time. No government required this. No law mandated that the old foundation be preserved. No insurance policy demanded that the pioneer stonework be saved rather than replaced. This was a choice, and it is worth asking, why would any institution make this choice? The cost alone is staggering. Most national preservation projects of far greater scope receive a fraction of this investment. What drives an organization to commit this kind of resource to a single building? The answer, from the church's own leadership, is theological as much as architectural. Church President Russell M. Nelson stated publicly that they were sparing no effort to give this temple a foundation capable of withstanding the forces of nature into what he described as the millennium, a reference to a future era described in Latter-day Saint belief. Whether one shares that belief or not, the statement tells us something important about how this community understands time. They are not preserving this building for the next decade. They are preserving it for an indefinite future, for people who have not yet been born. There is something worth pausing on here that goes beyond the engineering specifics. Throughout history, religious communities have built structures that outlasted the people who built them. The ancient mosques of Cordoba, the cathedrals of medieval Europe, the temples of Jerusalem, all were built by people who understood they would never see the full arc of what they were creating. The Salt Lake Temple renovation follows that same logic, but it does so using tools and methods those original builders could never have imagined. The base isolators that now sit beneath the pioneer foundation are, in a sense, one generation's gift to a building that another generation made possible. There is also a human story here that gets lost in the technical details. The workers who crawled inside those pipes with picks and shovels, repeating in miniature the hand labor of the 1850s, were doing something that no machine could replace. They were making a physical connection to the original act of construction. Whether you view this temple as a sacred space, a historical artifact, or simply an impressive piece of architecture, the dedication being applied to its preservation represents something that does not appear often in the modern world: a willingness to do things the hard way, because the hard way is the right way. Projects like this raise a question that applies well beyond religious architecture. How do societies decide what is worth preserving? What is the threshold at which an old building becomes worth saving rather than replacing? And when that threshold is crossed, how far do we go? In most cases, the answer is determined by economics. Buildings survive when it is cheaper to maintain them than to replace them. They are demolished when the reverse becomes true. But the Salt Lake Temple renovation suggests a different framework, one in which the question is not about cost at all, but about meaning. The Pioneer Foundation could have been removed for a fraction of the total project budget. It was kept because of what it represents to the people who care about this place. That is a principle that could be applied to many kinds of preservation: historical, cultural, linguistic, architectural. The decision to do something the hard way, because the thing being preserved deserves that effort, is a choice available to any community that chooses to make it. Not every community will make the same choice. Not every institution has the resources to even consider it. But the example exists now, and it is worth knowing about. A 170-year-old building saved by 150-foot cables and 98 rubber and steel discs, built by people working by hand in spaces no machine could reach. The past and the present, meeting underground. Which part of this project surprised you most? The engineering, the cost, or the decision to keep the pioneer foundation? Tell me in the comments. If this video made you think, subscribe to the Caelustra. See you next time.